So thank you, everybody. Thank you so much for being here this evening. My name is Edward. I am president of Chicago Ornithological Society, and welcome to another episode of Birds and Bytes, Sparrow ID edition. I'm really excited for this program this evening, especially considering this is an area where I'm assuming by the high turnout tonight, this is where we can all learn a little bit and grow. I know this is something I struggle with every spring, no matter how many springs I go through this process. So I'm super excited to bring you guys Alyssa DeRubeis to talk about this topic tonight. So with that said, you didn't come here to listen to me talk. I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Alyssa. And without further ado, virtual applause. Alyssa, take it away.
Thanks, Edward. And I also appreciate being here. Let me go ahead, share my screen. Okay, awesome. Yes, so my name's Alyssa. Love sparrows. Usually when I get asked what my favorite bird is, I mean, that's always a tough question to answer. But lately I've been leaning towards sparrows because they are underappreciated. And also they're very sassy. They have very interesting life history traits. There's a lot we don't know about them, so they're a bit mysterious. And I think their coloration and their intricate patterning is just absolutely gorgeous. So yes, love sparrows, and let's go ahead and get into it. Okay, so actually before I get into it, I've taken a lot of the field marks to look for. It's kind of a combo from personal experience and in looking in field guides. And though for me, when I go out, it's sometimes it can be hard to describe what I'm looking at because it just kind of comes, as you spend more time looking at birds, you just, if you see a chickadee, you know what it is right away, but you may not be able to describe it to someone. It's that kind of weird feeling like I know this bird, but I can't describe it. So kind of keep that in mind during the presentation. And also I am not from Chicago. I grew up in the Minneapolis area and now I live in Montreal. So if I get some little facts wrong about Chicago sparrows, please correct me. And what was one more thing I was gonna say? I think that's it for now. All right, so we're focusing on the songbird family Passerellidae, and these are all New World sparrows. So I will not be talking about house sparrows or Eurasian tree sparrows because that's in, are they in, oh no, they're in Passeridae, which is a very similar family name, but that's Old World weaver finches. So I'm not going to talk about those. Passerellidae is a pretty large family. Between North America, Central and South America, we have over 130 species. And in North America, even though I consider it a pretty diverse place for New World sparrows, we have less than a third of all the New World sparrows. And in Cook County, regularly, Cook County is where Chicago, Illinois is, by the way, for anyone who's tuning in from outside of the Chicago area, because I also advertised it to a lot of my friends and family. But in a typical year, it looks like you guys get around 20 species. And in its entirety, Cook County has seen 27 species if you count the rarities. And cool fact, every sparrow rarity or every rare sparrow that's been seen in Illinois has been seen in Cook County, which I think is pretty cool. Not surprising though, given the geography and the density of birders in Chicago. Okay, so what do we look for in a sparrow? That's a loaded question because there's lots to look for. There's a nice diagram there, by the way, that kind of simplifies it by Greg Neese with the American Birding Association. So I'll be referring to these images a bit throughout. So overall, these are small birds. They can be anywhere from chickadee size to cardinal size if you look at the toes. They're usually some combination of brown, gray, rufous, white, black, and they pretty much always have intricate designs like on their backs and on their wings. Oh, and they also have, I should mention, they have conical bills. So they're pretty thick billed, which they use for eating seeds. Although most of them are, I believe all of them are omnivores, so they'll eat bugs too in the breeding season. So more specific things to help differentiate them from other sparrow species, looking at the color palette, if you will. Is there the presence of an eye ring? The face pattern is usually extremely helpful. The tail pattern, and specifically looking if there are white outer tail feathers or rectrices, presence or absence of breast streaking. Even the flight pattern can help. And of course, always learning the vocalizations helps, especially songs, because those are pretty distinctive. The chip notes and the call notes, or the flight notes that sparrows give, can be a little trickier, but just like with everything, the more hours you put into, being out in the field and, being with the sparrows, the more nuances you'll pick up on. And usually they're found in more open habitats. So you're never going to find a sparrow deep in the interior forest unless there's like a pond nearby or something. So things like prairies, wetlands, shrublands, and forest edge are all ideal habitats for sparrows. So it's also good to know the phenology, and I'll be showing graphs of each species phenology in a moment. The time of year to see them, for the best time is spring and fall during migration, and we'll see that some species are actually only found in one of those migratory seasons. Many will spend the summer in the breeding season, and fewer will overwinter because Chicago's kind of cold. I'm using abundance graphs, and I wanted to show you guys how to find them in eBird, because if you're not from Chicago, these graphs are not going to be super relevant to you. So you can find them on your own. And then B, it's also really helpful for things like if you want to come visit me in Montreal, or if you're taking a trip somewhere else and you want to know when are the best times to find certain target species. So you go to the eBird homepage and you'll want to click on that Explore button. And then next, it's going to bring you to this page, which has a bunch of stuff on it, but you'll want to go down to the lower right where it says bar charts. And from there, you can pick the location. So for this presentation, I picked Illinois and Cook County. And then the data output will look something like this. And these are the bar graphs, so those can be really helpful too. Or you can click on these little tabs. So this one will show like a line graph, and you can look at abundance or like cumulative totals. And I think average abundance is one as well. Or you can go here, and that will bring you to the eBird map of, of that species with little geomarkers of where you could find them in Illinois or anywhere. Okay, so we're going to start with the smallest genus. I say Spizella in air quotes. Most of these are in this genus. The American tree sparrow is no longer in it, but just because it's structurally similar, I'm grouping it in with them. So Chicago sees 4 out of 6 of the North American species. 5 if you want to look at rarities as well. These are the tiniest sparrows. So if you see a tiny, what you think is a sparrow, chances are it's in this genus. They're pretty small build. They have a relatively long and forked tail. They don't have any breast streaking unless you're looking at a juvenile. They all have white wing bars, and they have an undulating flight. Things that are particularly helpful are bill color, presence of an eye ring, head pattern, and vocalizations. These guys give a lot of flight calls when they're flying. It's usually like kind of a high-pitched uprising, see, kind of like that. I think it's fairly distinctive, but again, those things take practice. Also, I want to say we're not going to have time to play recordings. So if you want to learn them, you can go on to, I like All About Birds is a good place to go. There's other places you can find recordings of them as well. Okay. And let's see. Okay, so the chipping sparrow. I just wanted to point out too, in the upper right corner for each species, it's going to show that box with the number and a color and like an arrow going up or down. So this means that this is a chipping sparrow on a continental scale has declined by 28% since the 1960s. And this is based on breeding bird survey data. So I was able to get data for most of the species, but if it's light red like that, that means it's just in, they consider, like Partners in Flight usually considers that like a slight decline where it's no conservation concern. And if it's a dark red, then that's a great conservation concern. And then green is neutral or good, I guess. Okay, anyway, chipping sparrow. Many of us are probably familiar with, oh, there we go. Okay, I was like, what did I click on here? The white arrow there shows that in the breeding season, they have a pretty conspicuous red cap. And they also have the black eye line, and it goes all the way through the eye, which is important in the non-breeding season to tell it apart from clay colored. So between the eye and the bill, you can see there's that black line there. They also have a pretty like neatly marked white throat as well. And the bill color is kind of like a grayish color. These guys are quite abundant. These guys are probably really familiar to you guys because they're well adapted to suburban areas. So they really like those nice, manicured lawns with the usually planted spruce trees, and they'll nest in the spruces. You'll also find them in pine forests as well, usually more open pine forests. And they have blue eggs, which is cool for a sparrow. Not that many sparrows do. So as you can see, most North Americans should be familiar with this bird as it's very widespread. And in, let's see, in the Chicago area, they should already just be starting to turn up. And then the peak migration in the spring is around the week of May 1st. And they'll be here through the summer, and then they are usually gone by early or mid-November. Okay, clay colored sparrow. This one's one of my favorites. These guys are a bit less common because Chicago's on the eastern edge of their migratory range. So this bird is more tan, gray, and white. So not so much rufusy like the chipping sparrow that we just saw. You'll see in the breeding season has a dark brown cap instead of a rufous cap. In the non-breeding season, it should be noted that the eye line, it stops at the eye. So it's pale between the eye and the beak, unlike in the chipping sparrow. And the back of the neck there, the nape, is a very like light gray, and it contrasts a lot more than in the chipping sparrow. And then in the breeding season, they also have this fancy mustache or malar right there, that white marking. And they have a pink bill. These guys like prairie with scattered shrubs or, any fairly open habitat like that. The song is really distinctive. It's like these really drawn out monotone buzzes. It's usually like 3 to 5 notes. Pretty distinctive. So yeah, as you can see, Chicago's on the eastern edge of their migratory range. Best time, and it's a very central species overall, as you can see on the map, in North America. The best time to see them is in the spring. So the very, very best time would be around the week of May 1st. So if you want to see this in the Chicago area, that will be the time to, keep an eye out for them. They do come through in the fall in much smaller numbers, usually between like late August and looks like late October. Okay, and then the field sparrow. This guy is quite the cutie because it has that very conspicuous white eye ring that gives it that kind of innocent open-eyed appearance. And it has the rufous cap that matches the rufous cheek patch or auriculars. And it's got a nice pink beak as well. These guys like really shrubby areas, usually with few trees, and they're known for their unique bouncing ping pong ball song. And this one's a bit more eastern, gets a little bit into the central US, but is really just in the United States. And in Chicago, it looks like they may have just started turning up. Like this week or last week. Best time to see them in the spring is around the week of April 22nd, and they continue all the way through. They're usually gone by, it's like mid-November, and doesn't look like they spend the winter there. Okay, and then the last of the Spizella is the American tree sparrow. This one is very like gray and rufous in coloration, kind of like the field sparrow a little bit. They also like fields and shrubland, forest edge as well. And they have that rufous cap, which is distinctive. One of the best ways to tell them apart is actually the beak, though, because this is bicolored. It's black on the upper mandible and yellow on the lower mandible. And they also have a nice central breast spot. And then here on the throat, it's not very cleanly marked, unlike in the chipping sparrow I showed you earlier. They're usually they're almost always in flocks, and they make a cute kind of jangling call. Definitely worth checking out on a recording if you haven't heard that before. So this bird is also pretty widespread, but doesn't make it into really deep into the southern US. And also, I used to live in Arkansas, and I can tell you that they're not common at all. I never saw one in Arkansas, so this map's not perfect. It's definitely a winter bird in pretty much all of the United States. And best times to see them in Chicagoland looks like they peak around January 22nd and also November 15th. But they'll be gone actually. So they're still there now, but they'll be gone by like mid or late April. And then we won't be seeing them again until like mid-October. Okay, done with the Spizella. We're moving on to the lark sparrow. Absolute stunner of a sparrow, if you ask me. And yes, it is quite uncommon in Chicago, but they are expanding eastward, and that's based on data I've seen from Minnesota observations. We're definitely seeing more and more spreading like east and north in the state. So maybe something to keep your eye out for in the upcoming years. This is a pretty large and unstreaked sparrow. The head pattern looks like this, whether it's an adult or juvenile. It's a really distinctive harlequin pattern. So if you see the face, you'll probably know what it is. And it's got the white outer tail feathers, which is also very helpful, and the huge black central breast spot there. These guys like fields with scattered shrubs and trees. I'm sounding like a broken record because it seems like a lot of sparrows like that. They usually like a component of barren ground though, so things like gravel pits and sandy prairies are also nice for these guys. Yeah, and then you can see in the map here that they're definitely more central and western, but they do come into the eastern half of the US a little bit, and not really into Canada much at all. Really the best time, as you can see on the graph there, to see them in the Chicago area is May 1st. And it's a pretty short window where they pass through. But yeah, definitely, worth keeping your eyes out, whether you're out in the field or you see reports of other people finding them somewhere. It's a cool bird. Okay, another big and cool sparrow is the fox sparrow. This is another large and chunky sparrow with a rufous and gray coloration. So there's not really any black in there. There's not much brown. Anything that's brown is actually more rufous. They've got a nice yellow bill there. They like brushy woodland edges, and they do come to bird feeders. They'll often be on the ground, like most sparrows like to be on the ground, and they do the double foot scratch where they kind of they bring it to the front, and then they do kind of like a little shuffle where they bring their feet to the back together. It's pretty fun to watch. And they're usually in mixed flocks. All right, and this is another very widespread sparrow. They do overwinter in small numbers in Chicago, but for the most part, they come through in bigger numbers in April or in spring migration. So April 1st being the best time, and then they come through in smaller numbers in the fall around October 15th. All right, we probably all know this one. It is a sparrow. I know it looks very unlike the other sparrows because it's just like a nice slatey dark gray color. There are a number of subspecies in North America, but the main one that we have in Illinois is this one that I have pictured here, which is the slate colored. You could see potentially Oregon which they have like a clearly marked like black or dark gray head, and then the rest of the body is more brownish pinkish. These guys are super abundant, a really common feeder bird. They're always going to have that nice like marked line there, and the nice kind of light pink bill, the black around the beak there, the lores. And they also have white outer tail feathers. And they're found in a variety of brushy habitats. They're also very vocal. So if you hear something in the winter, there's a good chance that it could be a junco. Super widespread, as you can see, and they are in Chicago between like late September and late April. Actually, yesterday was like, or this week is the peak, I guess the peak week to see them in the spring in Chicago. All right, and now we're moving on to the Zonotrichia genus. We have, out of the 4 North American species, Chicago has 3. These are really big and robust sparrows. They have a long and notched tail. They have this kind of pot-bellied appearance. They don't have any breast streaking, so that's helpful. They're usually gray and brown or rufous overall in color, and they all have a set of white wing bars. So things you want to look for are the bill color, facial pattern, and vocalizations. More so for songs, I would say. They all have very, very different songs. So first up is the white-crowned sparrow. Unlike the white-throated, it has like a whitish throat, but it doesn't have an outline around it. Also, this, never mind. They have a yellow bill, but if you're out west, they'll have a pinker bill. Out west, like Western North America, I mean. They like shrubby areas and fields, ideally with no trees, even though the birds on the right, those are juveniles, by the way, the birds on the right, or immatures, I should say. They are perched in a tree, but for the most part, they don't like trees. They're usually in flocks, and they do visit bird feeders as well. Like I said, very widespread in North America. And best time to see them in Chicago in the spring is around May 1st. And then in the fall, it's around October 8th. Also, generally for sparrows, and I would even assume for most songbirds, the spring migration period is shorter because they've got places to be, whereas in the fall, it's a bit longer. So you'll notice on the graphs that usually the spring migratory period is going to be smaller, and then the fall migratory period is wider. All right, and then the very lovely Harris's sparrow. Unfortunately, you guys don't get a lot of them, but it's semi-regular, I would say, in the Chicago area. They always have that black crown and the black throat. Even the younger birds in the winter have that. They have a nice grayish cheek there. And they do have a little bit. This is the only one that really has like a little bit of something on the chest, which is some speckling there. They've got a nice pinkish orange bill. These guys they're found in similar habitat to white-crowned sparrows, and also in flocks, and they love bird feeders. And the picture I took there on the left is a bird at a bird feeder in Iowa. Okay, so this is a very central species. So there's actually, there's not a ton of places you can see them in the US, and we're a little bit far east of them in Chicago, but you can see them mostly really just in the fall though. So your best time to see one would be around October 15th. So I have to wait until the fall to see them. Sorry, guys. And then the last of the Zonotrichia is white-throated sparrow. So they come in 2 color morphs. So there's the one on the left is called a white striped, and then the one on the right is called a tan stripe. So you can see one looks much prettier than the other. That's a prettier one, is the white striped. But both of them have the yellow lores. They should really have that in any plumage. It might be a little harder to see on the tan striped birds though. And then you can see that white throat has, it's very clearly marked, like with a thin black outline. And the bill is grayish on this one, unlike the other two. These guys are abundant and they're usually in really large flocks. Lots of birders recognize the old Sam Peabody song that they do. And they like forest hedges. They're pretty adaptable though. You can find them in a variety of habitats. And yeah, common feeder bird. And both of those pictures I took at bird feeders. All right, this one is fairly widespread, although quite a bit less common as you go further west. A number of them do spend the winter in Chicago, but by and large, the best time to see them is during spring and fall migration. So spring would be around May 1st is when their migration peaks, and then again in the fall around October 8th. Okay, then with Zonotrichia onto other sparrows. So we got the Vesper sparrow. This is like more of a classic like farmland sparrow. They're pretty uncommon in Chicago, but they do show up. This is a large and streaky sparrow, and it does look a lot like a song sparrow, but you'll notice that it has a really thick white eye ring that the song sparrow would never have. It also, when it flies away, has the white outer tail feathers that, excuse me, song sparrows don't have. And it has this white malar that kind of wraps around. Let me remove the arrow so you can see it, but it kind of wraps around the ear patch there. So I think it makes their face rather unique. They have a large and pinkish bill, and on some of them, they'll have that rufous, you can just barely make it out in that picture on the right, a rufous patch there on the wing. They like sparsely vegetated grasslands, so like agricultural fields, more like barren type habitat. This is one of the sparrows that is area sensitive, and what I mean by that is that they prefer larger tracts of habitat versus smaller fragmented patches of habitat. So as you get larger patches, you'll get actually denser breeding populations. Vesper sparrow is also widespread, and it does show it throughout all of all of Illinois, which is interesting. But in Chicago, they're just not that common. And the best time to see them is in the spring. Coming up here, the week of April 8th is it's probably going to be your best bet at seeing one. And then they come through in much, much smaller numbers in the fall. Okay, now on to some of my favorite, and I would say some of the most challenging, simply because these guys are just not that cooperative in terms of posing nicely for you on a perch. But I do have quite a bit of experience with these guys, especially the one pictured here, the LeConte sparrow, which was part of my master's thesis down in Arkansas. So I'll try not to ramble too much about them, but it's going to be hard to. Also, I say Ammodramus because it's been split up into like maybe 3 genera now, but they're all relatively similar, so I'm just going to group them. Out of the 7 North American species, Cook County sees about 4 of them, 4 of them on a regular basis, pictured down there. These are medium-sized sparrows. I think they look a little cartoonish with their proportions because they're really like big-headed and big-billed, and they have a short, rounded tail. They're kind of, I guess you could say they're kind of like the wrens of the sparrow world. And they're also very sneaky like wrens. so it all checks out. They have a pretty weak flight. Like it looks, if you see it enough, it looks kind of like fluttery, and they just kind of seem to like drop or float back down into the grass. They have really limited breast streaking, and unfortunately they are extremely secretive. Things you want to look for are their overall coloration, which you can even get a gist of that when it's flying away from you, if you can see it for like even a second or 2 in your binoculars. What is the breast streaking like? Facial pattern, if you can get a good enough look at that. The nape color, which is the back of the neck. The median crown stripe is actually very helpful, which is that, I mean, usually sparrows have like, what is it, like the 3 to 5 stripes on top of the head, and it's that one that's right in the middle there. And vocalizations help too. They all have very insect-like songs, and Henslow's is distinctive, but the other three, they have the same general song pattern. We'll start out with the grasshopper sparrow. This one's pretty unique because it's very like sandy, buffy colored overall. And they don't have any streaking. So I think of the amodroms, it's one of the easier ones to identify. Some individuals, it's more conspicuous, but they do have like a yellow lores with the yellow kind of shoulder patch there. It's very plainly marked here, like very blank, unlike in the other species. The nape is gray and brown streaked. It's also on the back, it's more of a rufous and gray color combo. And then these images I took from the Sibley Field Guide, you'll see that that median crown stripe is a very light gray to whitish color. These guys, they like prairies, hayfields, and pastures. They tend to like drier ones versus like wetter sedge meadows, for example. They have two song types. The one that I said that it's considered the basic one, which is like the Nelsons and LeContes, and then they have a complex one, which sounds, it sounds crazy. It sounds like someone's like crinkling some wrapper. I don't know. It's hard to describe, but it's super cool. And actually I don't know if you guys saw my picture for the very beginning slide where it was like at sunset or dusk or something, but that's a grasshopper sparrow and it has its wings up and it's doing that complex sound. So it probably means something. I don't know what though. This is another area sensitive species. So larger patches, the larger the habitat patch, the better for this, which is why things like habitat connectivity are very important, especially for grassland birds, because you'll start to notice that a lot of grassland sparrows are area sensitive. There was a cool study that came out like, I want to say 5 years ago. And you know, when you go to, let's say you go to your favorite local grassland and you see there's a fence post and there's a grasshopper sparrow perched on there singing, and maybe you go there and you see it June 1st. And then you come back 2 or 3 weeks later and you see a grasshopper sparrow perched on that same fence post. And most of us would be like, oh, looks like that grasshopper sparrow is still there. Chances are that's actually a different bird. The birds will switch out their breeding territories like once every 2 to 3 weeks. I think it's if the males are not successful. So there's a chance that that could actually be a different bird, which is fascinating. They do keep themselves busy, I suppose. This is a more eastern and central species for sure. We do, you do get them in Chicago. Best time to see them is in the summer, but they will start coming back in, looks like 3 weeks or so. And then they're one of the earlier sparrows to leave. So they're usually gone by mid-August. Okay, and then my favorite, the LeConte sparrow. And yes, I do have a tattoo of one on my back. I love them very, very much. So this one's quite uncommon. They are unfortunately very shy, but the experiences I've had with them, like as you can see with these birds here, they do occasionally pose for you and they'll just sit there and I don't know if they're like kind of stunned or maybe they're just, maybe, there's some boreal species where they don't really have that fear of humans. It could be something like that because they breed farther north where they probably don't encounter that many people. So this is a light sandy orange color overall, I would say. Well, a bit, yeah, light is the key word here. The nape is a purplish gray color. The median crown stripe, it's very hard to see on that picture on the left, but it is white, trust me. It does have a light grayish purple cheek patch that matches the nape. And it has it does have a white throat. It contrasts a little bit with the rest of the orange face. These guys like sedge marshes, prairies, and pastures. They like somewhat, definitely wetter areas, I'd say, than grasshopper sparrows, but probably not quite as wet as Nelson sparrow. Another area sensitive species, but based on my what I found doing my non-breeding bird surveys for my master's degree in Northwest Arkansas, they definitely use restored prairies, which is great news. And I know in the Chicago area, they've been really actively restoring a lot of sites. And I have a couple good friends actually who they're restoration biologists, and they work at a lot of the prairies, I guess north of Chicago. But anyway, so there's habitat for them there. This is probably a species, this in Nelson's. Honestly, the best way to find them would be to walk through the grass and flush them out. If you're walking on a trail, they're not going to be hanging out in the trail. They're going to be like out in the grass. They do seem to have really fluctuating populations by year. So, like the year I was studying them in Arkansas, it was the winter of 2017, 2018, and there were just gobs and gobs of them. And then like the next 2 years, there are almost none. So you might get lucky when you're in the Chicago area, and it could be, a good year for them coming through. This is a very central species, and we're on the very eastern edge of their migratory path. So you can see them in the spring. The best time would be May 1st. Otherwise, you'll have a larger window to try for them in the fall between October 1st and 22nd. So almost the whole month of October. All right, and then here's the Nelson sparrow. It's uncommon, and I haven't had as much experience with them, but the times I have encountered them, they're like not cooperative at all. They have a similar color pattern, but my impression is that they're a bit darker colored than Lacans. And you'll see that has a much darker gray cheek patch, and that white throat doesn't contrast quite as much with the rest of the head. It also has like this dark gray nape, and it has the white streaks on the back, which is pretty helpful to tell it apart from the other amodroms. And on the Lacans, I said the median crown stripe is white, and on this one, it's dark gray. Also, if like a lot of these features are going to be really hard to make in the field, like all in the moment. So when in doubt, if you can take a picture and then you can look at it later, that's usually really helpful. So they're like Lacans sparrows. They like wetter prairies, but yeah, even wetter than Lacans. I know some birders who have luck with them in wetlands that have smartweed. All right, so like the Lacans, it's very centrally distributed, although we have breeding populations on the eastern coast of the US as well. Yeah, these guys are tough. They're really tough in the spring. Really the only time is around May 15th, but you'll have a better chance in the fall, where the best time to see them is around October 1st. Okay, what are we doing? Okay. Hensel sparrow. So apparently this bird hasn't really declined, but it is a habitat specialist. So my theory is that when they started the breeding bird surveys in the 1960s, there just weren't that many back then either. So I guess maybe they've stayed stable through that time, but Partners in Flight still considers them of high conservation concern. But anyway, Hensel sparrows, yes, they're cool. They have like a yellow and olive colored head, not orange so much like the others, and then it's really rufous on the back. And you also see it does have a little bit of white flecking on the back as well. And this one has like crisp streaks. I didn't talk about the streaks on the other two, I just realized, but they have like slightly more coarse streaks, whereas this one is almost more spotted. And they do have that nice little dot there, right behind the ear patch. And that bill, can we talk about that bill? I mean, that thing's huge. It's definitely the biggest of the amodroms. And then if you look at the medium crown stripe, that's like a buffy yellow. It looks like it matches the color of the face. Okay, yeah, so these guys are picky. They like prairies, tall grass prairies, but it has to have a developed litter layer. So that means that if it's been burned recently, when you burn it, right, you get rid of that litter layer. So Henslow sparrows will not be at recently burned sites for like the first probably 1 to 3 years, if I had to take a guess. I think I've read some papers on it. That sounds about right. So yeah, very picky, but they do seem to like hay fields, as long as there's a litter layer. Not surprisingly, they're also area sensitive. So the bigger the habitat patch, the better. And they have a really nice hiccup song, and it's very insect-like, and it's so short that you know, if your ears could blink, they can miss it. Oh, and then a cool fact, I learned this from a biologist for the Wisconsin DNR. He told me that they are known to be active at night, and they'll sing at night too, which is pretty interesting. Not relatively few songbirds sing at night. All right, Henslows. Not many places you can find them in the United States. And yes, they are just in the US, but Chicago area happens to be one of the few places. So congratulations for that. I'm sure you guys have attracted birders over the years, specifically to see things like Henslow sparrows. They will start arriving around mid-April, and then their abundance peaks around June 15th, and then like the grasshopper sparrow, they kind of peace out sooner rather than later. So they're gone by mid-August. Okay, done with the Ammodramus. Now we're on to Savannah sparrows. I know we're doing okay on time. All right, I know I get so rambly about sparrows. I do apologize. Okay, Savannah sparrow. So this guy looks like kind of like Song and Vesper, right? At first glance, it is a medium-sized and streaky sparrow. They tend to have a more direct flight than Vesper, and certainly more than song sparrow. I'll get into that in a little bit. And when I say direct, I mean they don't undulate so much. It's, you know, they undulate a little bit, but it's pretty level. There are a number of subspecies. We only get one in Illinois though, so don't worry about those others. They usually have the yellow lores. It's not super obvious on all individuals, but if you see that, you're golden and you know what it is. They do have a forked tail, unlike the song sparrow. And they also have a longer, more pointy and pink bill, unlike the song sparrow. This spot here, I don't know what you'd call it. We'll just call it a throat stripe. It's thick, but on the song sparrow, it's like very thick. And they also have pink legs, if you can see the legs. And then the median crown stripe is a very light gray, and it's a dark gray on song sparrows. These guys like prairies, agricultural fields, pastures, things like that. When I did my field work in Arkansas in that one winter I told you about, they loved the sites that were just burned, and there was like absolutely no vegetation. Like that, those were seemed to be their preferred sites. They are also area sensitive in the breeding season, although I don't believe they were in my study in the winter, at least. All right, they're very widespread, so every North American birder should want to be familiar with this one, I think. In Chicago, they've already started arriving, it looks like. Best time to see them is around May 1st. They spend the summer, and then all migration peaks around October 1st, and then they're gone by the end of November. Okay, and then I believe this is the last genus, Melospiza. We have all 3 North American species in Chicago. All of them are pretty common. They're medium-sized sparrows. They have a long rounded tail, and when they fly, they don't really keep it upright, so it kind of just like bounces behind them, is my impression at least. For the most part, they have breast streaking. Things you want to look for: breast streaking. They're a little different between the species. Overall coloration, facial pattern is helpful, and the song, of course, is helpful. First one, probably quite familiar to many of you, is the song sparrow. It is the largest in the genus, and it's extremely abundant. Yeah, actually, I've used even the size and overall shape alone to identify these guys, but that's, again, I was doing field work where I was like, walking a ton through grass, and I saw tons of these and swamp sparrows. So I kind of developed that search image for them. There are lots of subspecies, but we only have the eastern subspecies in Illinois. And that was that throat stripe I was talking to you about. It's, I don't know if you can tell, but it's very, very thick. It's much thicker than on a Savannah sparrow. And they have this grayish bill, and then its whole roof is here on the back. And then the streaking is a bit more coarse than that what we would see in a Lincoln's, although, you know, juvenile song can look a bit like that too, but which is the bird on the right, by the way. But we wouldn't expect Lincoln sparrows in Chicago in the summer. So if you see something with crisp streaks like that in the summer, it's probably a song sparrow. When in doubt, song sparrow. They are really adaptable to a variety of early successional habitats. They seem to like water a lot, from what I can tell. They're quite widespread, as you can see, and we are right around the peak time to see them in Chicago in the entire year, which is cool. And they'll be here until it looks like probably the end of December even. Lincoln sparrow, here we go. It does look similar to the song sparrow, but it is a little different. You'll see it has much crisper streaks, and it's usually accompanied by this buffy color. It would only be buffy on a song if it's a juvenile. It gets a little bit of that brownish wash on it. It's brown on the top, and then the rufous on the wings. So the color is a little different. It's not quite as red as a song sparrow, and it's also a little bit smaller. And then you can see that that throat stripe is really, really thin compared to a song sparrow. It also has a grayish bill. They like shrubby habitats, and up north they breed in woody bogs. Very widespread overall, so hopefully most of us want to be familiar with this one. They won't start coming back to Chicago until around mid-April. Best time to see them is around May 8th. They're gone by the end of May, and then they come back around late August, early September, and they peak again around October 1st. And then they're gone by, looks like early November. So they're just here during migration. Okay, and then the last of the Melospiza is the swamp sparrow. These guys are just so darling. I love that rufous cap. And then they also have rufous on the back there too. And then they also have that central spot on the breast there. So I do want to point out that the bird on the right does look a bit like a white-throated sparrow. So that's why if it seems like I'm going into unnecessary detail, it's because I personally find swamp sparrows and like duller white-throated sparrows confusing. Forgot why I put that there, so I'm just gonna ignore it, but probably trying to think. Yeah, I think it has a gray nape there, whereas I think on the white-throated it's not like so pronounced. And then shoot, what is this? Gosh, now I'm drawing a blank. Shoot. I think it has a broader, I think it's like this kind of eyebrows a bit broader on swampies than white-throateds. But here's a big one right here. No wing bars. White-throateds always have a little white wing bars. They're not like super conspicuous, but they're there. These guys really like marshes, especially cattails. Good stuff, good stuff. They're cool for sparrows because they're semi-aquatic when they're looking for little grubs. So they will actually submerge their head underwater, so they're kind of like a American Dipper wannabe or something. These guys are fairly widespread, but mostly like Eastern and Central. The best time to see them in Chicago is between April 22nd and May 1st. And they do spend the summer and winter in really small numbers. And then they'll come back through again in October. Okay, and then this one is, well, it doesn't even look like a sparrow, but it is a sparrow, the Eastern towhee. This is a really large sparrow. and it has a long-tailed, it has a long tail, and it's a very colorful black, orange, and white. And they're sexually dimorphic, which most sparrows are not. So the male there is on the left, and then the female is there on the right. And when they fly away, they do have the white outer tail feathers. They like open shrubland and forest edge. They also like oak savannas as well. Many of us know the drink your song that they do, so it's pretty easy way to identify them. You do want to be careful though, because they do hybridize with spotted towhees, and the way to tell them apart, so you can't really see that on either one, but the wing is basically all black except for this white patch, like right here. And if it was a hybrid with a spotted towhee, it would have all the speckling that a spotted towhee has, but then it would also have that white wing patch. So you want to, so if it's a pure spotted towhee, it will not have that thick patch there. Okay, and Eastern, as the name implies, very Eastern. They have already started coming back to Chicagoland, it looks like. Numbers in the spring peak around April 22nd, excuse me. They do spend the summer, and then they pass through again in the fall around October 8th, and then they are gone by mostly by the end of October.
Okay, this is a great question from Mike S. You're in the field and you see a sparrow. What is the sequence of questions you ask yourself to identify it?
Yes, that is a good question. Usually I look at the relative size, which humans, it's the closer the bird is to you, the better you can judge size. So size, and then the overall proportions, like does it have a long tail or short tail? Is it like, does it have kind of a bulky appearance or more slim appearance? Things like that. And then also the overall color pattern. Those are I would probably go in that order. It certainly helps if they're calling, while they're flying. And sometimes I only have to hear the call note to know what it is. I don't really have to look at the bird. But usually those things. So overall size, overall dimensions, and then the color palette. Oh, is there a reason that the Savannah sparrow is not in the key? I think Alan's referring to the that diagram of the eastern sparrows that with the ABA. I don't know. That's kind of strange that it's not. Yeah, that they didn't put that in there, and I just realized that now. Let's see. Oh, okay. Karen Gibson asked, does the grasshopper sparrow have a flat-looking head compared to the other amodroms? Trying to think. Maybe a little bit, but I personally wouldn't feel comfortable like using that as a field mark, because birds can, they can hold their feathers in different ways depending on if they're feeling relaxed or a little bit more alert. So that can be confounded by their behavior as well. For Henslows, it doesn't seem like they're seeing much migration. Yeah, so that's okay, I'll read the whole question. For Henslow sparrows, it doesn't seem like they're seeing much in migration according to the map colors. Anyways, this is correct. So this is true. There's a few other species are like this too. I think Kirtland's warbler is another one. Yeah, and my guess is that they migrate like fast. Either they're not detected, because in this case it's very secretive, or that migratory period between like that winter range and the summer range is so quick that they're just like not picked up. It's also possible that maybe they fly. I'd have to like look and see what's been studied about them, but maybe they fly directly from the winter to the summer breeding ground, and like they fly nonstop since they're not that far. I mean, considering that some songbirds can fly over open ocean for several days, I feel like that's, that maybe that's doable. But yeah, that's a good question. That's kind of weird to think that we know they migrate, obviously, but like, where are they between the winter and the summer? Good question. Let's see, is there, oh, okay, another question. Is there one main thing you'd look for when distinguishing a Lincoln's from a song. I feel like Lincolns, they're just slightly smaller and they have a little bit more of a petite look, and that might be from the crisp streaking. I usually look at the streaking and the overall coloration, like, does it feel very red? If not, does it have those really fine markings on the chest? And then, someone else asked, do you find it easier to identify sparrows by song than identifying marks? So I guess yes and no. Yes, for the most part, because then I don't even have to look for the bird if it's far away or if it's like obstructed by some grass, for example. However, birds can learn the wrong song on rare occasion. I do know of an instance where, and they even recorded the bird, like they took a video of this bird. It was a field sparrow in Arkansas, and it was singing a perfect Carolina Red song. So you do want to be a little careful with the song, but there's a 99% chance that it's accurate. Okay. Well, those are the questions I saw, unless people want to ask more.
Last call for questions in the chat. All right. Well, then I think on that note, we'll go ahead and wrap it up. Alyssa, thank you so very much. Virtual round of applause for Alyssa. Thank you for spending your evening with us and sharing your knowledge. I know it was a lot, and we joked when you were emailing about talking everybody's ears off about sparrows, but I think everybody here appreciated it this evening and probably could continue to talk our ears off about sparrows all night happily. But we're going to go ahead and wrap things up here. If you guys have any further questions, please continue to reach out to chicagobirder@gmail.com, where we can either answer your question directly or connect you with Alyssa, where we can kind of keep that conversation going. Additionally, like I mentioned at the beginning of the program, if you're not already a member of COS, why the heck not? You get to support awesome programs just like this one. And so head on over to chicagobirder.org, where you can learn more about future programs on future topics and support the awesome work that we're doing and learn more about these awesome topics. But once again, thank you, Alyssa, for your evening. And thank you to everybody who joined us this evening for really informative time here on Birds and Bytes. So thank you all so much. Have a good one.
Thank you.